Welcome back to 24 Chambers of Film. Today we're going to be talking about arguably the best bad movie ever made, 1994 Street Fighter. Now, as we've done in the previous two videos of this series, we're talking about the first four movies that went from video games to live action, and that was Super Mario Brothers, Double Dragon. Now we're going to be talking about Street Fighter. The next one's going to be Mortal Kombat. So the funny thing about Street Fighter, the interesting thing about the Street Fighter movie is that unlike the first two, which were complete box office flops, the Street Fighter movie actually made money at the box office.
Congratulations.
On the contrary, I mourn.
Okay.
It had a budget of about $35 million and it made about $100 million, but people still did not like it. Critics panned it. The fans at the time weren't too happy with it. Now, I said it's the best bad movie ever made because as time has gone on, that movie has become a cult classic. People love it. And I think what it is that the younger audience that went to go see that movie when it came out really enjoyed it, right? They weren't as critical of the movie as the older fans of the Street Fighter franchise or critics were when it came out.
That was beautiful.
So as time has passed, it holds a special place in their heart and they think it's a good movie or say it's a good movie. And I know because I was one of those kids. I enjoyed the Street Fighter movie when it came out. I thought it was good. Then I grew up and I watched it again and I was like, wow, this really wasn't that great.
Your ass is 6 months overdue, and it's mine.
But I still like it. Why? Because again, nostalgia kicks in, right? It takes me back to my childhood. It was actually one of the first movies that I remember my parents didn't want me to see it because they were like, oh, Street Fighter, it sounds so violent. So I had to go sneak in to watch that movie. So to me, that's a memorable moment in my childhood. And I like it. Does it mean it's good? No, it is not. It's just like there's music that I like that I know isn't good or isn't great for everyone. It just holds a special place for me. And that's why I like it. And that's what I think happened with Street Fighter. Those kids that didn't critique it like an adult would or an older Street Fighter fan have grown up now and they're like, no, it's a good movie. Look, let's be real. It's not a good movie. It's an entertaining movie. And like I said, it holds nostalgic value to a lot of people, but it is not a good movie in any way, shape, or form. And the reason for that is because Capcom dropped the ball on this one. See, Nintendo gave away the rights when they made that movie. Capcom kept all the rights and everything that happened was their final approval. So there's no one else to blame in this but Capcom. So before we move on to this, let's go back to how this started, right? Capcom, they have this hit that is Street Fighter. Two Super Street Fighter, arcade, NES, Super NES, Sega, just killing it all over the place, right? So they want to get into the movie business. They put up $35 million to finance this thing, and they have the final say on everything now. They hire Steven E. D'Souza to be the writer and director of the film. He had done previous things like writing Die Hard, 48 Hours, Commando, The Running Man. Wasn't a nobody, man. He had a pretty good resume. So they say it's time to make this movie. They're going to be filming in Thailand and then eventually ended up filming in Australia as well. And per Steven E. D'Souza, he has said that they wanted a major action star to play the role of Guile. So the problem is their budget is only $35 million. They can't afford a major action star, really. So they end up settling on Jean-Claude Van Damme. And D'Souza actually brought up the fact that Jean-Claude Van Damme has an accent.
Any other new business?
And because they watched Jean-Claude Van Damme movies in Japan with subtitles or dubbed, they didn't realize Jean-Claude Van Damme had an accent. So when they told him that, their whole strategy to fix this was, okay, well, we're going to explain that he's from Louisiana.
You serious?
But D'Souza said that didn't make the final movie. So there is no explanation as to why this all-American hero has a Belgian accent, European accent. I don't know what you want to call his accent, honestly. He's from Belgium, I believe. And it ended up, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
They did not matter to them that this blonde-haired, all-American good guy in the movie was going to be played by a guy with clearly a foreign accent or an accent that is not American.
Have you lost your mind?
No. You've lost your balls.
what's crazy to me is you could have, like, if you're going to do that, you could, like, nowadays, right? You get a lot of British actors who come in and they do these roles. You don't know they're British. I don't know how many times there's been an actor and then I find out he's British afterwards. And I'm like, holy crap, that guy's British. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy how good they can hide the accent. But apparently Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't held to that standard. So that's it. They cast him. And here's the problem with that too. Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't cheap. A man wanted $8 million. They gave it to him. Their whole budget was $35 million. Jean-Claude Van Damme alone took up about 25% of their budget. That doesn't make any sense to me, any way, shape, or form. Then they brought in Raul Julia, who what they paid him was never disclosed. But apparently between him and Jean-Claude Van Damme, most of the budget was gone. So that's why the rest of the cast were a lot of guys that you probably haven't heard of. The only one I recognized from the rest of that cast at the time was Damien Chapa, who played Ken. And the only reason I recognized him wasn't because he was well known, is because my cousin had shown me Blood In, Blood Out, and he plays Miklo in that movie. And that's why I knew who he was. So casting to me just was an issue from the get-go. I love that movie, but even as a kid, I always wondered, why is Jean-Claude Van Damme Guile? Like, I understood the fact that Guile is an all-American hero and Jean-Claude Van Damme is speaking with an accent and doesn't come across as the all-American hero. So that to me was one of the biggest issues. Next issue was the fact that they cast Raul Julia in this role of Bison, because Bison is this big, menacing figure. If you look at him in the game, he's pretty yoked, and Raul Julia doesn't represent that. Now, before all the hate starts coming in about Raul Julia did a great job in that role, I agree, Raul Julia did a good job. The man can act. I understand that people liked him, liked his performance. He did a good job acting, but he did not look like M. Bison. Yeah, they put on the suit. The uniform was good, like a good M. Bison uniform. But when he put on the suit, he didn't portray M. Bison, in my opinion. I didn't look at him and say, that's M. Bison. He didn't give me that feeling. Whereas Jean-Claude Van Damme, I could see he kind of he can represent Guile visually. I didn't get that from Raul Julia. Now, the other problem I see with this is, and unfortunately, Raul Julia isn't with us anymore. He passed away before Street Fighter was actually released, and Street Fighter was his last movie. They cast him, and he had cancer at the time. Because of his cancer, he was in a weakened state, and they had to rush production. That didn't make any sense for me. Why would you hire someone who cannot film the movie and you have to change everything around to accommodate that? Respect to Capcom for giving him the role still. 100% that's class move on their end, right? But that wasn't helping anybody out, because now all of the other actors, from everything that I've read and listened to in interviews, they had to basically learn their scenes 24 hours or less before they filmed them, how to do the action sequences. And then they had to go in and do them when they were actually supposed to be training for months on end for these roles. Instead, now it's like, all right, we're about to train. Boom, boom, boom. All right, scene. It doesn't make any sense. They just shouldn't have cast him in that role. One, he didn't fit the role, in my opinion. Great job with the acting, though. Guy's a great actor, but he didn't fit the role. And then you casting him essentially affects the rest of the cast as well. So that just didn't make any sense. Then we move on to the story. They said they learned from the mistakes that Mario had made, but see, I don't feel like they really did, because Street Fighter, the film, was a tournament, right? And there is nothing that represents that in any way, shape, or form when it comes to this movie. The characters have great backstories in Street Fighter. Even the early Street Fighter 2 arcade game, the backstories are pretty good. And as they go, they get evolved and they get even better. But they had enough to really do something, and they just completely omitted that. They ended up making Han and Ryu these low-level criminals.
What's wrong with you, man? There's people fighting upstairs, dying upstairs.
Yeah, and they get paid for it. We don't.
They ended up making Zangief a dum-dum. They ended up making DJ some computer scientist, essentially, right? Because he helped build all the stuff for Bison. It just didn't work, in my opinion, the way they did it. And that was done intentionally. D'Souza said that they didn't want to just do a martial arts movie, that their whole, or at least that his whole vision was that they were going to make a movie that was Star Wars, James Bond, and a war film all put into one. And I think I don't know about the James Bond part in there, but I don't even know about the Star Wars part, but they definitely put somewhat of a war film together.
I'm going upriver, and I'm going to kick that son of a bitch Bison's ass.
And we ended up getting what we ended up getting. Part of it was that, that movie when it was being filmed in Thailand, the ending when they're supposed to raid Shadaloo, it was all in boats, right? Which is kind of weird. You don't see that very often. I thought it worked in that movie. But the reason they did that was because they couldn't fly helicopters because they're filming in Thailand, which is right next to Myanmar. And Myanmar's always had a lot of, tension in that country. I believe right now they're still going through a coup, and they couldn't use helicopters because they didn't want it to cause any issues, right? They didn't want anything to arise from that. So the production on this movie was pretty crazy because Capcom had agreed to a December 1994 release, and they wanted to stick to that. So when they got in there and they started filming, everyone was go, go, go. They were on a tight schedule. Another part of the story evolving into somewhat of a war film is because they had a deal with Hasbro to release G.I. Joe action figures. I remember buying my G.I. Joe Street Fighter action figure back in the day. It was pretty cool. I remember getting Guile, Ryu, Ken, and Chun-Li, and a Bison. I don't remember who else they had, but for sure they had those 5 because I actually had those 5. And the reason they needed to do the Guile took the lead in this role, right? Because in the game, he's a main character, but look, in the game, it's Ryu and Ken. Those are the 2 superheroes, like not superheroes, but those are the 2 superstars in the game, right? But they put Guile in that role so they could release the G.I. Joe action figures. They needed him as the main guy to back that play that they had agreed to with Hasbro. So that's another reason. So Capcom, to me, didn't come at this with the intention of let's make a true depiction of what Street Fighter is. So they had full creative control, but it seemed like it was more to financially try to benefit from it, which is fine. I get it. It's their movie, but that's why critics didn't like it, right? They weren't. That's why fans weren't impressed with it. They basically pushed what the game was to the side for financial gain, which, depending on how you look at it, that's fine sometimes. Sometimes it's not, right? Then the next thing that was an issue with this movie was the fact that they wanted it to be PG-13. So they filmed this movie and they went to the MPAA, and MPAA hits them with the R rating. Boom. Then they go cut the movie down. Then they get to it with the G rating, which for them, G rating and R rating were both just a kiss of death, because with an R rating, you're not going to get the younger kids to go see it. And adult, you're going to rely solely on adults, right? Which might have worked because, that's Jean-Claude Van Damme's fan base right there, right? So Capcom was paying a lot of attention to the Mario movie, right? When the mistakes they made, they should have been paying attention to the Double Dragon movie, because Double Dragon made sure to keep that thing as PG as possible. And that was a problem, right? So then, when you look at the movie, the action scenes, they're not bad, but trust me, they're not great either. Yeah! So then it got the G rating, so they didn't go in and cut that to add anything more to it to bring them back up to like a PG-13 rating, which is what it ended up getting. They got the PG-13 rating because they added extra dialogue of Jean-Claude Van Damme saying the word shit.
Look at this. Anytime, big head.
And that bumped him back up to PG-13. So you got this mild action flick now. You can trick everyone to go into the movie theater, but they're still going to feel sour about it when they realize it's not what they were expecting. And that's essentially what happened here, right? Everyone, I don't want to say that they were tricked, but everyone went to that movie theater expecting something completely different. Unlike the Mario trailer where you couldn't tell that was Super Mario Brothers unless they said it in the trailer. When you saw this, the trailer looked pretty good. It didn't look bad. But then you got there and you were like, what the hell is this? Right? They made the money, and they said that to this day, they still make money off of this movie. And that's great. But what was the long-term effect of them making that decision? There was never a sequel, which they planned on doing, because when the movie was released in theaters, they didn't have this in the movie theaters because Raul Julia had passed away. But in the VHS release, Bison, and even in what you have now, like on Fandango at home or any of the other streaming platforms that has the movie, Bison resurrects himself at the end. So they left that out because Raul Julia had really passed. So they clearly had intentions for a sequel, but then they never did it. Probably because they realized we pulled the wool over their eyes one time. It's not going to happen twice. We didn't get another Street Fighter movie for years. And then we got that piece of crap, The Legend of Chun-Li movie. And then there's another one that was released, a few years ago that focused more on Ken and Ryu. I haven't seen that one. That was direct to video. And apparently that one's actually pretty good, so I might have to check it out. They're supposed to be doing a reboot now in like 2026. But see, they made their money on that one, but then they couldn't do it again, right? They couldn't release a sequel because, again, no one was going to fall for that after seeing the movie. To me, if they would have just stayed more true to the game, they probably could have maybe done 2, 3. They would have, what I would have liked to see done is they build their own action star, right? Guy who fits Guile perfectly, right? Who looks like him, who fits that real American hero role. I had no problem with them making Guile the forefront of the movie, but I did have a problem with what they did with the rest of the characters. Like I said, Ryu and Ken just being like these low-level criminals, I thought was garbage.
Now, you coming with me or not? Maybe before this place blows up, we can find something worthwhile.
I felt that they should have made, like, there's no background that tells you that Ryu and Ken are martial artists. It just seemed that the movie, that what they want to do with this, they just wanted a financially successful movie. They didn't care of how it would affect the legacy of the video game or to stay true to the video game, right? And again, the movie's great. I love watching it now. It's very entertaining. Like I said, it's the best bad movie out there, right? It's almost aged like fine wine because people seem to love it way more now than they did back then. But doesn't mean it's a good movie. Like I said, it's the best bad movie. It's still a bad movie because of all this stuff that I've mentioned. You know, if they really wanted to, in my opinion, to make this movie right, they needed to recast a lot of that movie. All right, Ryu and Ken didn't cut it for me. They made E Honda, who's supposed to be a Japanese sumo. They made him a Samoan guy, essentially. Balrog, who is a bad guy, made him a good guy. Like, I didn't like this whole thing where it was like 2 teams, right? They broke it up into 2 teams. I thought that was not the right move for this. What I would prefer to see is you have it like in Street Fighter 2 where you have the 4 bosses, right? You have Vega, you have Balrog, you have Bison, you have Sagat, and they're trying to take over the world. They wanted to stick to this war thing, right? And they host a tournament, and Guile has to get to the tournament, right, to infiltrate. And you got Ken's backstory and Ryu's backstory, you know, and why they want to be a part of it. Then you throw in Zangief. You could throw in every single character. I also hated how freaking Blanca looked. Oh my God, the guy looked like a joke. They just should have omitted him from the movie. He literally added no value to that movie, right? Dalsim did all right. With that said, one of my biggest issues was how the action scenes played out. A lot of them seemed a little bit slow. And again, I don't blame him, you know, because they didn't have time to practice, didn't have time to train, didn't have time to prepare for this. And that was a mistake that Capcom made. They did that. And again, like Raul Julia, should not have been Bison. Jean-Claude Van Damme should not have been Guile. That right there cemented their fate, I think, into what this movie was going to be. The leaving out of the fireballs, and the sonic boom. Sonic boom! The fact that they omitted most of that, aside from the Flash, when Ryu does a Hadouken, right? Hadouken! I thought was okay. I didn't think that was anything. It made sense to me. Okay, let me put it that, right? But it just seemed like so many things. They just almost like they just didn't. It's almost like they were mocking us on purpose. And then at the end, when they're all out there, and then they do the pose, like everyone does their little fight pose, and the Street Fighter logo comes up. I'm like, are you shitting me? Like, I get it that you want to appeal to a younger audience, but you also want to appeal to an older audience, right? Like, why are you guys doing this? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. It was just so many little things like that. Just take it from video game to live action, stick to it, and you should be okay, all right? So with that said, that was the 3rd video game to ever go from video game to live action. And it was the first one that was actually a success at the box office, money-wise. It was not a success when it came to the critics' opinions, when it came to the fans' opinions. Might think different if you hear people talk about it now, because all these little kids that grew up with it now saying it's great. But look, at the end of the day, it's not great. It's a good, entertaining film, but it's not great. And Capcom is to blame for that. But we'll see, man. Maybe they'll redeem themselves with the next installment of Street Fighter. I really hope they knock that one out of the park, because like I said, the Street Fighter stories are all so great. Animated Street Fighter movies are so good that it's just crazy how different the live action is to the animated one. And they actually released an animated one in 1994. And that stands a test of time. Like, if you love Street Fighter, you have to watch that one. That one's amazing. I remember seeing that and I was like, damn, now that's freaking good movie, and it shits all over the live action one. If you are looking this purely from a Street Fighter perspective, it is 100 times better than the live action Street Fighter movie. Again, and I'm beating a dead horse with this. The only reason I feel anyone likes the live action Street Fighter movie right now is because of nostalgic value. And that's it. So with all that said, that's Street Fighter. Third video game turned into a live action movie. Box office success. Not a success when it came to what the fans and the critics thought. But overall, in the end, I guess it was a success for Capcom. Now, the next movie that we're going to be talking about in this video series is going to be Mortal Kombat. And personally, to me, was the best adaptation at the time of a video game to live action, and it was also financially successful. So appreciate you guys watching. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you still love Street Fighter? Is it a nostalgia thing for you? Don't lie. Come on. Don't tell me it's good. It's got to be nostalgia, right? But would appreciate it if you guys would smash a like on this video. If you guys would subscribe to the channel, stay up to date with the rest of our videos. This is 24 Chambers of Film. I'm Nathan, and until next time.